everyone, bonjour. Welcome to this Historic Places Days tour of Battle Harbour. We'll start the tour shortly, but while we're waiting, feel free to introduce yourselves using the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Let us know where you're participating from today and whether you've taken part in Historic Places Days in the past. We're so excited to welcome you to today's tour of Battle Harbour Historic District. My name is Natalie Bull. I'm Executive Director of the National Trust for Canada, and I'm here with Peter Bull, who's the Executive Director of Battle Harbour Historic District, and my colleagues Kirsten Evenden and Holly Boulay, who's there in the background making everything work technically. So just a note that we want everyone to participate today. Feel free to use the chat box and the Q&A box to communicate with us. I'm not as far east as Battle Harbour in Labrador today, but I am in New Brunswick. And it's important to me to start the tour today by respectfully acknowledging that this place from which I'm speaking is the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqey people. And I know that all of you participating today work and live on lands and territories of many Indigenous peoples, and we encourage you to reflect and to learn more about their cultural and traditional relationships with the land and the environment. The shared human experience of storytelling and experiencing land and heritage places are both really great ways to create richer and more accurate stories of the people and the places that make up this country. And it's one of the things we can do on our shared journey toward reconciliation. And it's really at the heart of Historic Places Days, which is an amazing annual festival now in its 6th year, a great way to celebrate historic places and the stories that they are a gateway to. So why don't we just skip to the next slide, and a few words about Historic Places Days if it's your first time participating. It's really a way that the National Trust has developed in partnership with Parks Canada and other great partners to shine a spotlight on historic places from coast to coast to coast. I love the tagline for Historic Places Days, every place a story, because it's really through storytelling that these places come alive. This year, Historic Places Days runs through to the end of the month of July. I think it's as important as it has been over the last few years as sites begin their recovery from the unusual experience of COVID. And we know that this year, many more sites are actually open to the public. So in addition to the virtual fun of Historic Places Days with contests and selfies and the social media excitement that we are able to generate for all of these hundreds of great participating places, there are also wonderful events happening on the ground in places across the country. So we'll hear a bit more about that later on. I want to just also on the next slide acknowledge our wonderful partners and sponsors without whom Historic Places Days would not be possible. And also to mention all of the great sites and their staff and volunteers who are part of this this event and really using Historic Places Days as a platform to bring attention to their own sites, to attract more visitors and to tell their stories more widely, including Battle Harbour Historic District. So we're so thankful to have Peter Bull with us today. A word about the National Trust, and then we'll move quickly into the tour. I think Historic Places Days is really becoming a great flagship of the work the National Trust does to inspire Canadians to visit and discover and care about the historic places in their own communities. In addition to inspirational and celebratory events like Historic Places Days, we also offer tools and programs for volunteers and advocates and heritage organizations and heritage workers to do that important work of saving and renewing the heritage places that matter to all of us. So now, what you've all joined us for today, and I see we have many participants on the line, a tour of this incredibly rich historic district on the far east coast of Labrador, a site of national historic significance. I'm so pleased to hand the baton over to Peter Bull. No relation, but we're interested to learn more about each other's heritage and backgrounds. So thank you very much, Peter, for offering this great tour. It's going to be a multimedia extravaganza, and we're going to hold all of the questions until the end. We want your questions, and we'll have lots of time to respond to them, but if you can just type them into the Q&A box or the chat chat box. We'll be watching for them and addressing them once Peter has presented some great information and visuals and an experience of this incredible historic site. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Let me share my screen. There, share. Oh, I got to put it on this one. There we go. No, it's like everything, isn't it? You got to start from the beginning. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and then hit this one. So I'd like to say thank you for coming and being interested in learning more about Battle Harbour. I've got 20 minutes, a half hour here now. I can't even, I'm just touching on this, such a little piece of the magnificent things that are in and make up Battle Harbour National Historic District. We're also a National Historic Site, so we got 2 for 1. I'm going to tell you some of the things about Battle Harbour and hopefully pique your interest enough that you want to come and see it for yourself. So as Natalie said, we're on the east coast, far east coast of Labrador. This is where we are. To get to Battle Harbour, generally you can drive up through Quebec and up through Labrador on the Trans-Labrador Highway, which was finally paved this week. So now it's a pavement right across Labrador. That's one way. And then lots of other people come in through Newfoundland, through Deer Lake, and then cross over on the ferry to Blanc-Sablon and then drive the 170 odd kilometers to Mary's Harbour. And this is where one would pick up our passenger ferry. And it's a 9 nautical mile trip out to Battle Harbour on our little island out here in the sea, in the Labrador Sea. It takes about an hour and 15 minutes, but rather than just telling you about it there, I thought maybe I'd show you. And I think I can close that down up top there. But so Battle Harbour, this is the island on the left. On our right is Great Caribou Island. So we're in the Tickle here right now. So when you go to Battle Harbour, you're going to find a really excellent example of a Newfoundland and Labrador outport from 50, 100 years ago. You're not going to find any cars, street lights, no cell service. We do have Wi-Fi in our store and loft bar area, but you really sense of stepping back in time when you go out there. You might have seen the 2 towers on the hill when we were coming in there. Those are, what from all I can gather, the last 2 standing Marconi towers, certainly anywhere in North America. I found 2 single ones, but no more other ones. And most importantly, for people like me, Labrador is famous for its black flies and mosquitoes. You won't find black flies and mosquitoes out there, and that's probably got a lot to do with the fact that it's can be a little bit chilly. It's foggy and chilly out there today. So here's the air photo of Battle Harbour. So the island is about 1 kilometer long and a half kilometer wide. There are no trees out there. Any wood that's out in Battle Harbour now has been brought out there by dog teams in the winter over the ice, or floated out, or brought out in boat and ferries. We got a lovely 2 kilometer hiking trail, walks around the island, takes you through the cemeteries and through the town proper. So just a quick overview of the long history of Battle Harbour. So the Maritime Archaic people were in the area about 6,000 years before present. We had Paleo, Dorset, and modern Inuit people there, well, right up to today. And then the first Europeans were started coming over in early 1500s that were from Brittany. And I only learned this from one of our guests there the other night. I didn't know Jacques Cartier was a Breton, so he probably came by there too. And on the maps there, it has been noted that it's, excuse my French, atelier, a workshop. So it was a Ile d'Atelier, and that was the first notice of it on a map, a European map. We know the Basque were there after the Britons, and they had it called Batel, B-A-T-E-L, which was one of their small boats that they fished in. So Batel. The first European, first English company to set up a fishing enterprise was John Slade and Company in about 1760. And they started coming over from Poole, England, going back and forth each year. Generally, gradually what happened was they had an enterprise big enough that they needed people to stay over the winter. And by 1830, some of the men who were overwintering had met some Inuit ladies in the area and had families, and that's when people started the Battle Harbour, we'll call it family, and the community started to grow, and the town would overwinter, would have people staying there, and up to as 250 probably people at any one time. In 1871, a Newfoundland company, Bain Johnson Company, bought it. And then in 1955, it was taken over by the Earl Freighting Company in Carbonear, Newfoundland. Resettlement happened in Battle Harbour, as it did everywhere, around Newfoundland and Labrador. And the last people to stay out there year round was 1968. And I believe it was just two brothers who stayed out there that time. And then, of course, the big 30, we had the 30th anniversary of that this week, July 2nd, when the fishery collapsed and the moratorium started. And that was a momentous occasion, and it played a pivotal part in Battle Harbour's history, and what you're going to see from me and what you'll see when you come to Battle Harbour yourself. Just like to point this out, though, at the last day of our season last year, we're open from beginning of June till Labor Day. And the last day of the season, we found this piece of soapstone, which was a part of a seal oil lamp. So this could be 2,000 years ago. You see the charring on it from the fires of the person who did that all those years ago. And I think it was a really cool find. This would have come from Fleur-de-Lis down in Newfoundland, on the Baver Peninsula. So in its day, there were it was salt fish was the main thing that brought people here. It was quite the fishery. This picture has, by my count, 26 schooners in it. When Bishop Field, the Anglican bishop, came there in 1848, he counted 92 schooners in this little tickle. So that gives you a sense of how important a center it was. And it was known as the saltfish capital of Labrador. And a lot of saltfish came out of here and went to Europe and Spain and Portugal and the Caribbean as well. So in 1992, when the moratorium began, there were people who had been looking at this for a long time, and they saw an opportunity. And I didn't mention earlier, so the Battle Harbour Historic Trust was set up in 1990, and with a mandate to protect, restore, and interpret and promote Battle Harbour's significant heritage resources. It started with a church that was falling in, and the people in the community said, we can't let this happen. And so they fixed up the church, which we're going to see in a little bit. But then when this happened, an opportunity was seen by some prominent people to capture Battle Harbour, because it was a very important, the buildings there were of great historical significance. So the trust bought basically all the buildings there from the Earl Freighting Company for $1, and with the thought that we would fix them up and bring them back so people could see it and save the premises. So when the moratorium happened in July of 1992, it was the largest layoff in Canadian history. Over 30,000 people that day lost their jobs, all plant workers and fishermen. So what the plan that was hatched was in the Mary's Harbour, St. Louis, Lodge Bay. These are 3 communities near Battle Harbour. They took 26 of the men in the area, and over that winter, they taught them. They brought up restoration carpenters, and they learned how to be restoration carpenters. And then over the next subsequent 5 years, they've restored all the buildings in the area. And it's important to note that this is a restoration. It wasn't a reconstruction, as someone mentioned on the island the other day. I had to correct them. these buildings were taken apart board by board and seen how they were built, and they were put back the same way they were. They weren't covered up, they just built back again. So it was quite the labor intensive and historically accurate operation. And in 1996, we began taking visitors to the island. So it's a fishing room, and those buildings you see there on the right, that's the fishing room. So it's a mercantile premises, and each one of those buildings had a specific operation. So there was a salt store where they stored salt, a flour store where dry goods were, a pork store, a salmon store, a herring store, a seal store. So every building had its own use. So one of the ones I just mentioned there is the pork store, and this is pork store. This building here is one of, if not the oldest structure in Newfoundland and Labrador. It's about 1780 or so, and it's a studded construction. And of course, certainly there was salt pork kept in here, but molasses and butter, all the wet goods like that would have been in there. It's a really neat place to go into. I've been reading about artificial intelligence being used to put smells on paintings and things like that. When you go in this building here, you can smell the pickle that spilled out of the barrels 200 years ago, and you're looking at the beams and the posts that were hand chopped by the men all those years ago. So it's authentic is the word I always use. You know, you really get a sense of going in there, and for myself, I'm 6 foot tall. People were either shorter or they were very smart and realized that they didn't need heat going up high in the ceiling because it's low ceilings. But it is a fantastic building. So as I mentioned, salt cod was what Battle Harbour was renowned for, and this is one of our pandemic COVID projects. We didn't open to the public in 2020, but we did use 501 gallons of paint and rebuilt this little piece of the flake. So a flake is where the salt cod would have been dried. So just so you can get a sense of it, long before Mr. Ford had his assembly lines, the cod would be brought in from the cod traps or long lines. It would have been processed there, heading, gutting, and splitting, with splitting being the last person taking out the sound bone or the backbone of the fish. So you had a flat fish then, really. And so with 225 pounds of codfish, 75 pounds of salt would be used. So you put a layer of codfish, put a layer of salt over it, another layer of codfish, layer of salt. And it would be left like that for 3 weeks or so. And then once the salt then, of course, would have drawn out a lot of the water, they would have been taken and washed, and then would have been pressed. The fish would have been pressed to get some of the water out, and then they would have been put on these flakes during the day to dry, and then would be processed to go around the world. Of course, this was long before there was any refrigeration or chemicals other than salt to put in to preserve foods. So we were really happy there. That was the first bit of salt cod. That was in last summer. So one of the local people dried his cod on the flake, and so that gives you an example of what it looks like. If any of you've been to Portugal, I know Bacalhau, you'll see these in the stores everywhere. And in the top right there, it's the Labrador Flag. And I apologize if you're seeing that thing up at the top. But now, if you look at this, this is what it was like in its heyday. And the flake that I showed you, the little piece rebuilt, was about this little piece here, which I think is about 1% of what was there. So all these piles that you see would be piles of codfish, which this is either in the evening or in the morning, because during the day they would be spread out over covering this whole flake, and then they would be stacked up skin side up so that they would be protected over the night, because you didn't want it getting wet. If it looked like it was rain coming, everybody would have to run and make sure that they were all stacked up, because you didn't want your fish to be made into a lower grade. So right now, this is what it's like there. It's one of our boardwalks. So there were three groups really of people who worked in this industry. You had your liviers. There were people who lived here, years. They lived year round in Battle Harbour. Then you had people like who were known as the floaters. And that would be someone like my grandfather who went up 100 years ago when he was 13 years old to Labrador. And they were on schooners from Newfoundland. And upwards of 10,000 people from Newfoundland came up to Labrador every summer to fish. And they would have fished out of their schooner. And then also there were stationers. And these were people who came up on coastal boats. And they didn't have their own schooner or big vessel like that. So they would have a little house on the shore and they would fish out of that over the summer. And then when the season was over, they'd go back to Newfoundland, but they didn't have their own schooners. And I just want to give you a sense of what conditions were like in 1893. This year was the year Dr. Grenfell, who I'll talk about, his second year in Labrador, but he brought with him Dr. Kerwin. And he was, if he was around today, he would have been an Instagrammer because he was taking pictures and keeping a diary, and he kept some very interesting pieces. So I'm going to let you hear his words description now of what it was like for some of those stationers in those years.
Friday, October 13th, 1893. During the morning, I went to the other side of the harbour to see Brown, who lives in the worst house I have seen in Labrador. I took my camera, hoping for a picture that I knew would startle the folk at home. And I wanted a view of the two boys of 7 and 8, as when I'd seen them in July, it had been a wonder to me how their tattered garments kept on their bodies. For cover, they made no pretence to. Great was my astonishment then to see the house swept and clean. A few alterations made in the one room, the holes in the roof where the dogs had fallen through mended, and the two boys washed and in well-mended clothes. The explanation was to be found, I soon saw, in a new inmate of this house. Last Monday, Brown, the widower, had been to another harbour to find a Newfoundland woman he had met and had a conversation with in early summer. Now that her summer engagements were over, he brought her home and married her at Battle on the following day. Her first 10 days' work had certainly altered the appearance of Brown's house and children. In this one room, built of logs well banked up with earth outside, lived Brown and his wife, his first wife's brother, and her two daughters, aged 12 and 14 by a previous husband, and his two boys of 7 and 8. One room, 13 feet by 12.
And so these are the actual photographs that he took of Les Brown and his wife, who he married after a conversation, which I think is funny, but it really paints a picture of how poor and desperate the people were who lived in the southern Labrador in those days. What that piece that you just heard is one of 21. It was like Natalie was talking about stories. The stories that I put, Battle Harbour's put on an app, which you can download from the App Store. It's called Battle Harbour Voices. And it works by GPS on the island, but you can use it on your own self, in your own home. And over the years, I've looked for interesting little stories, and we use voice actors to read them and put them into this app. And it adds a little bit more color to the tours there. This is a self-guided tour. We have one of our staff provides a walking tour on the island, and it's like that building I talked to you about. It's an authentic tour because Nelson or Daphne or Searle grew up in Battle Harbour, and so they answer the questions. They know exactly what it was and the way life was for them growing up. So I've mentioned the church. This is St. James Church. It's the oldest Anglican church in Labrador, and I think it might be the third oldest church in the province. And this is where the trust all began. When this was falling down, the locals decided we can't let this happen, and so they restored this old church. and it was started in 1852. And that font there came over from England, and it was consecrated in 1857. Bishop Field was adamant about getting there. An Anglican bishop wanted to get in there, and it was really a race against the Catholics in a lot of places in those days, and just wanted to make sure that the Church of England was there. That harmonium, the organ in the corner, is the same age as the church, and if you come and visit and you know how to play it, you're more than welcome to beat out a tune. So I mentioned there's a couple of cemeteries on the walking trail. This is the old cemetery. It's, there are some of those headstones which we've come to notice, to know in most cemeteries, but there are a lot of head and footstones which are literally stones that were put down in the ground, and these were likely people who came up from Newfoundland and may have drowned, and there was no way to get them back to Newfoundland. It could have been people in the area like Brown who had no money for anything else, and so they have a marker, but we'll never know who was there or anything about them. We have a lot of, not a lot, we have some really cool wildlife in Battle Harbour. We've got Arctic fox. They're really, I'll say, brazen. They're not afraid. They'll come down and come right up to the people. We've got some, they'll den and have their pups. Right now, we're not seeing them so much now because I think they're in the stage where their pups are a little bit delicate, but later on in the summer, they'll come out and we'll see the pups, and it's a cool extra for coming to Battle Harbour. So I've mentioned Dr. Grenfell earlier there. So he used to bring over doctors to work in the summers and work year round there. And in contrast to Brown's house, this was the house where the doctors and nurses would stay. This is a prefab building from England, where the doctors and nurses would stay. And I'm going to let you hear what it was like there now in a second. And it's interesting just doing this. We have 10 designated historic buildings, and this one from 1904 is not one of them. And it's got my mind going now thinking we really should try and get this one designated, because it is an interesting building for sure. And so just so you can get a sense of it, this is another one of our pieces on our Battle Harbour app, Voices app. Nurse Hagen was from New Brunswick, and she came over for, I believe, over a year. But I'm going to let her tell you something about this now.
Well, we thought we were going into the real wilds when we started, but we found Battle Harbour to be quite the social centre. 3 mailboats came in with students who volunteer from Williams, Yale, Harvard and Princeton. They get distributed all along the coast. Once we even had 16 of them in the guest house. There was even ice cream to be had, at least when one of the students got hungry enough to row out to an iceberg for the ice, and we could talk him into turning the freezer on his return. We used condensed milk for ice cream and for everything else. But the foremost producer of joy for the community was a gramophone. For the patients, it was the greatest source of contentment on earth. In use at all hours, on one afternoon it played for 3 hours at a stretch. That gramophone could fill an empty hall in the hospital in 2 minutes.
So that was quite the contrast to Brown and his family in their root cellar for all intent. But again, it shows some of the differences in Battle Harbour. And now this is the man himself, Dr. Grenfell. Nurse Hagen there talked about the doctors coming from Yale and Harvard and these places. This guy was a money raiser extraordinaire. We'd all would love to have someone like him on our board of directors for raising money. He used to go down to these places and hobnob with all the elite rich people down there and tell them, what a great opportunity for your son or daughter to come up and have an adventure in Labrador. And they came and getting away from the craziness which was New York City or these places, and they come to Battle Harbour and spend the summer. I know one in 1920 he brought up a gentleman, and they they raised $2 million in 1920, and that summer. So I mean, it kind of blows your mind how much that would be in today's dollars. But that money actually still goes on today. The International Gravefield Association is still on the go, and they spend the interest off $30 million is my understanding. And so they've helped Battle Harbour this year by giving us money, a grant to rebuild one of our wharfs, which was well past its due date. And I forgot to mention earlier too, we're not a part of Parks Canada or anything like that. We're a trust, a private trust, and a public trust, and we make our money through donations and accommodations things, which I'll tell you a little about in a second. But I want to let you can hear some of Dr. Grenfell's words when the hospital, which was the first hospital outside of St. John's, was in Battle Harbour up in Labrador. And I'm just going to let you hear his words on the end of an era.
It's November of 1930. Fishermen setting up for their voyage home and for winter at Battle Harbour. The office of the old company, Bain, Johnson and Company. Well, that was in their large storehouse. As usual, at noon, the doors were locked while all hands adjourned for their lunch. But then an hour later, the whole place was in a blaze. A strong wind was blowing. Everyone worked to save the village, but so fierce was the conflagration that even the Marconi pole on the top of the hill was burned. Our first hospital and its auxiliary buildings, well, they're all gone. They all went. I'd say after these 38 years, I felt the loss bitterly. Triumphs and defeats of all our early work, well, it somehow seemed to cluster around that, our original building. A cigarette thrown onto a floor on which lay a great deal of excelsior, fresh from the unpacking of the winter supplies, had caused the fire. But the real things, the valuable things, the important things in life, they cannot be burned away, however. And already we have a new school, a small hospital and outbuildings that are all functioning under Dr. Murray and his wife up there in St. Mary's River. It's a much better situation. But there it owns its own lands. It has its own water supply laid on the house. It's only 7 miles away from Battle Harbour and is on the mainland, and consequently much more accessible in winter than where we set up all those years ago.
So, although resettlement happened in 1967, with the moving of the school and the hospital, the clinic into Mary's Harbour, that was really the beginning of the end of Battle Harbour as a year-round settlement. But what would happen? They would go into Mary's Harbour over the winter, in where there was trees and fresh water and everything like that. But then, as soon as they could get out to Battle Harbour in the spring, they'd be out there getting settled in again. They would, they weren't rich, so they would have to bring their stoves back and forth and their beds back and forth, and they'd bring the teacher back and forth. So the teacher would come out with them in the spring and set up the school, and they lived there through the summer and as late into the fall as they could. And when the fish was all done, then they'd move back into the bay and take all their stoves and their beds and the teacher and moved back into Mary's Harbour. So these are just some of the many stories which can be told out in Battle Harbour. So I just want to give you a sense of what Battle Harbour today. So as I mentioned, we we don't get any operating funds from government. We do get help from federal and provincial governments with projects like building wharfs or siding or roofs or things like that. But our main source is accommodations. When you come out to Battle Harbour, we have 4-star accommodations in some of the historic buildings. Actually, you can stay in the Isaac Smith House or the Bunkhouse, which are nationally designated historic buildings. And my understanding, there are very few, if not that's the only 2 that you can actually overnight in. And it's a pretty neat piece there. We also have, of course, dining room and the meals, and there are incredible meals. This is now the salmon store is where the dining occurs. We also have, this is the top of the shop. This is where you can get your Wi-Fi and send pictures back to your friends of the wonderful time you're having in Battle Harbour. This is the loft in our bar, and you know, we don't have entertainment all the time, but there's guitars there if anybody comes and wants to pick up and play a tune. And it's neat because we have guests from you know, all over North America and Europeans and all over the world that come to Battle Harbour. And this is a place where everybody sits down and you chat with the people who are at your table with you that night. You know, you're on an island. We only have about 32 guests a night is the most we can have because it's limited by our ferry. And you know, people make new friends here, and just the conversations not unlike hundreds of years ago when people from over the different parts of the world came together. We also have a conference center. We try and get some small groups in for that. And so with that, we're going to leave Battle Harbour. This gives you a sense. This was pre-pandemic, and I can tell you I know that because the roof on the church is not painted. The roofs now on all of our buildings are bright red and really sharp. And we're just going off the end of the island here. And I want to thank you all for listening to me. And I really hope you take the time sometime to come to Battle Harbour. It's, as we say, it's off the beaten path, but well, there's off the beaten path, and then there's this place. It's a little bit of an effort to get to, but there is nowhere like it. And for whatever reason, I don't know the physics behind it, but Battle Harbour has some of the most incredible sunsets ever. We've had about 10 in a row, not dissimilar from this over the last little bit. And with that, I'll say thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you.
That was a great tour. I can almost smell the pickle juice and the fish and feel the salt air.
Yeah.
So what a great taste, and really inspiring. I know I want to start planning my trip to Battle Harbour.
Well, when the province uses pictures to promote the Newfoundland and Labrador, I was saying if there's 10 pictures they use, 3 of them are from Battle Harbour. That's just the way it goes.
That's great. Now, really, really beautiful buildings, and what an interesting history. So yeah. I've got lots of questions, but I'm going to give our participants a few minutes to start typing their questions into the Q&A box. And I might just share a bit of information while we do that. What a great story of resilience for a heritage place that really needed to reinvent itself. And while it's before my time at the Trust and your time as well, I know that the National Trust did have an early role in Labrador Straits with a program that we ran that was really about focusing on regions that had lost their major industry and helping them find new resilience through tourism. So it's interesting to see how successful you've been with your colleagues there in turning this site into a real destination. So it's a pretty exciting story. We're a provincial anchor destination, and we're a Destination Canada's signature experience as well. It's fantastic. I'm just going to say a few words about Historic Places Day. So just a reminder that Historic Places Days runs through to the end of July, and we're happy to have amazing places like Battle Harbour and hundreds of other sites that are participating this year. There are events happening on the ground, more of a focus this year on actual events, but also some virtual events as well. You can go on the website at historicplacesdays.ca and search by your location to visit places near you. And just a word about our photo contest. So this is a way that you can win some money, but also do good at the same time. Through our photo contest, you can win $1,000, and $1,000 would also go to the heritage place that you feature in your photo or your selfie or your virtual selfie. So it's a really neat way to give back, but also benefit through participating. And if you add some details about your visit to your photo, that gets you an extra chance to win. So check out the details about all of those programs on the Historic Places website at historicplaces.ca. Historicplacesdays.ca, sorry, I better get that right. And then I think we've got some questions. Do we have some questions queued up? Kirsten, why don't you bring your screen up? Oh, we've got a question. Peter, can you speak a bit about the colors used to paint all of the buildings in the harbor?
White is easy. I know that. From my understanding, they weren't always white and red like that. There would be different colors. That's the times what I've heard is whatever paint was around. I mean, like these were not wealthy people, so they didn't get different colors like that. But the red roofs, now that would have been because now we're using stain now, but years ago it would have been red ochre and seal oil would have been used and put on there, so it would have preserved the cedar shingles and given it a red hue. And there's just not enough seal oil and red ochre around now to do it. It would be lovely to put it back like it was, but so that's why the roofs are red.
Neat, but they're all cedar shingle roofs.
On those, a lot of them, yes, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And that's like I say, all these things when they need repairs, that's expensive repairs, and that's where the government comes in and helps us out with these type of things.
Peter, I'm interested to hear a bit more about your personal connection to Newfoundland and Labrador and to this site. How did you come to be the executive director?
Well, it was 10 years ago. It's I was with the Department of Tourism, and they laid off 1,200 people, and as a result of that, I got bumped out of my job by someone else. And I happened to know the chair of Battle Harbour at the time. And I asked her if she knew of anything. She said, I might have something. And I came up to write up a report on 5 consultants that she had brought in, because it's had a second transformation in the last 10 years. Because what it was before, it was a National Historic District that tried to do tourism, and that's a failed model. And what we are now is a tourist destination that has a National Historic District. Right. So the emphasis now is on the guests we have and their meals and accommodations, but they still get all the stories and everything like that. So now we're making a bit of money to help support ourselves. So right. I stayed on that summer and project managed some of the things, and then rolled into the role of executive director, and I've been there ever since. But I live in St. John's the rest of the year off season, but my grandfather, like 102 years ago, when he was 13 years old, was leaving on a schooner from Salvage in Bonavista Bay, coming up past here, and everybody talked about Battle Harbour, and he was going up further to fish, and he fished off Labrador for 20 years his own self.
Great. Oh, that's great. I think Kirsten has a question from one of our participants.
Yes, the questions come forward. When did the accommodations open, and what sparked that idea?
That started in '96, and that was before there was even a road to Mary's Harbour. You had to come in by boat. And just a step back again to when I came 10 years ago, and I'm not taking credit for this. This was the plan to do. There was like 3 or 4 cottages. One of them being the inn, which we have now. And the inn had the dining room and the kitchen in the bottom, and it had 5 rooms upstairs and 1 shared bathroom. So when 10 years ago, that's the way it was. There was the kitchen had moved, but there was 5 rooms and 1 shared bathroom. So it was realized that if we're going to be putting a focus on the guests and the tourists that are coming there, so we made 5 en suites. it didn't like that. So it's we've made it a lot more, lucrative is not the right word because we're not lucrative, but money making abilities by focusing on that piece.
And what an immersive experience for people who are coming to visit for the first time.
Everybody who
Smells,
comes,
everything.
yeah, everybody who comes to Battle Harbour goes away an ambassador for the place. It's truly amazing.
Peter, you mentioned the livyers, the people who were living there year round. Are there any livyers now on the island?
Well, no one lives there year round because when Labor Day comes, we drain all the pipes and close it all up and leave it for the polar bears over the winter and the Arctic fox. But 5 of our staff are from the local area. They have cottages, cabins out in Battle Harbour. So they're as close to livyers as we have, really. And we're really blessed to have them out there because this is their home. And so the stories they tell are, when they were little boys and girls. So it's really cool that way. Yeah.
Oh, that's neat. You mentioned, you showed early on an artifact, a soapstone artifact that was found, I guess, last year.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about the Inuit layers of history at the site?
That's a piece that is missing in Battle Harbour, and I'm really interested in putting more of the Indigenous history in there, because it's over the years, when the Europeans, we're in the area of Nunatuavut, and in their land claim, and I want to work with them to really tell their story in there, because it's missing right now. And that's why I was so happy to find that little piece of soapstone. And we know there are arrowheads there and that, but there's never been any real test pits or archaeological work done that way. And I think that's a really important piece that is missing and needs to be to add to the color and the stories of the area.
Yes, no, that's great. We know in our work at the National Trust that those stories are missing from many sites, yeah. And we're working hard with Historic Places Days to involve more and more places and stories that do reflect the real richness and the breadth of our collective history.
100%, that's good.
Any other questions popping up, Kirsten? I'll actually ask you, Peter, you used the phrase, we're in the tickle.
In the tickle.
And maybe even in New Brunswick, I don't think we use the term tickle.
I think it's a Newfoundland term. It's a narrow channel between two pieces of land. Ours is between two islands, and it's like I get asked this all the time, and I give people the dictionary of Newfoundland English, and they go and look at it. And one person noticed it's a difficult channel to get through too. So they said, maybe you got to tickle your way through. So I said, okay, that's a good way to think of it. But the Battle Harbour's tickle, you can see why it was chosen, because no matter which way the wind is, it's sheltered. And makes a big difference to your life when your boats are not banging up against everything like that.
That's my word of the day.
Oh yeah.
Great. And Kristen, you've got a question?
Yes, actually, I was curious, Peter, when you spoke about who had lived there over the course of time and who came and settled and who was there originally, it struck me as a real diversity of cultures. The Basque, for example, the Bretons. And I was curious, is it sort of identifiable where some of these cultural threads impact the fishing culture that you talk about there? So is there sort of a particular tradition from the Bretons or even the English who settled there that has become part of this Newfoundland life now?
Yeah, not so much the Bretons, as that's the proper way to say it, or Britons or the Basque. I mean, they were there and they're long forgotten. I mean, looking for little pieces of them. But the thing that the fishing culture and everything in Newfoundland and Labrador, the people who lived here were tough and they were ingenious. To eke out a living in these places. I mean, they had to be adaptive and figure out the ways to do it, and the cod trap made a big change to the whole fishery. As before it was all hand lines and bait and that was not in Newfoundland, just on the north shore of Quebec. was where that was developed, and that was brought up and made a huge difference into the success of fishing. With that, I didn't mention when I was talking about the production of salt fish, 75 pounds of salt and 200 pounds of 225 pounds of codfish would make 1 quintal of dried cod, which is 112 pounds. In its day, 20,000 quintals of fish came out of Battle Harbour. So, I mean, it's, it was, people figured things out as they went, and adapted. And really, if we take it to the extreme, by 92, we'd become too successful, and with fish finders and everything like that, and fish to sea empty almost. And so that's why, 30 years on, there's still no huge commercial fishery of codfish off Newfoundland, right?
Peter, we're at the National Trust. We're very proud that Battle Harbour is one of our passport places, one of the over 100 places in Canada that our members can visit for free. And we're thankful to you for being one of our partners.
Well, glad to be.
So, and I see part of the reason we do this is really to bring more attention to sites like yours. And I'm pleased to see comments in the chat about someone who's been to Newfoundland many times, but never to Battle Harbour. And she's really hoping to visit one day.
The worst you can be in tourism and in this industry is a kept secret. I mean, we want the world to know about us. I mean, Battle Harbour is a delicate place, but we're lucky in that, I'll say, I control the ferry, so we can control how many people come out. People and locals who come out in their own boats, that's fine, but we can really control that and make sure that the place is not stressed too much. Because we have diesel generators, which we're hoping to get off and figure out something else. But all these things have to be brought out there, and so it's it's important to keep it nice, and we want people to know about it and come out, but we don't want it to be stressed too much.
Yes, exactly. I might ask Holly to advance to a slide, and maybe Peter, if you think about anything you'd like to share that you haven't already said, and everyone participating, you've got another minute or two to think up your questions. But just a segue to talking about Battle Harbour as one of the National Trust passport places that members can visit for free. We've actually got a membership promotion running during Historic Places Days. The next 20 new members who join the Trust can have one of these beautiful I Love Historic Places totes. So visiting historic places is one of the many benefits of membership in the Trust, and we'd love to have you as part of our network. And then maybe we'll just have a look and be thankful again to our partners and our sponsors, Parks Canada, Via Rail, and many other partners and promotional partners that help make Historic Places Days a reality. So thanks so much to all of them. So I don't think there are any more questions popping up, but Peter, do you have any last words you'd like to share?
Just, I hope everybody who's here can get a chance to come out to Battle Harbour. And someone came out to Battle Harbour there yesterday, said, pictures don't do this place justice. You really need to come and experience it firsthand. And I hope you get there. Great.
Well, the pictures are pretty spectacular. So can't wait to visit in person. And maybe Holly, just leave that last slide up, and it's the link to information about Battle Harbour so people can start planning their visits, and to Historic Places Days. So you can also make your actually, those are contact links if you want to have more information about both Battle Harbour and the National Trust and Historic Places Days. So huge thanks to Peter Bull of Battle Harbour Historic Trust for giving us this amazing experience today. And I thank my colleagues Kirsten and Holly from the National Trust. Everyone get out there and enjoy Historic Places Days during the month of July, participate in the contests, and do your part to help save and renew and bring attention to these great historic places that tell the many stories of Canada.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you. À la prochaine.
See you.
Bye-bye.